Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to give you 5 reasons to read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I recently reread this to prepare myself for The Wicked King, and I feel like I'm finally in a place where I can properly process and share my thoughts. This is the first installment in a YA fantasy series about Jude, who was stolen away from the human world along with her sisters and taken to be raised in the High Court of Fairy by the very person who killed her parents. There she lives in constant fear because this world has made no secret of the fact that mortals are expendable and therefore she can never truly be safe. More than anything else, Jude wants to become a knight for the High King so that she can gain power and earn her place. But to do so, she must defy the undefeatable High General who raised her, she must forsake her family, and best the youngest prince who uses his power to torment Jude on a daily basis. She quickly becomes far more involved in twisted court politics and ruthlessly paced games of strategy than she ever thought she would, until absolutely everything is at stake. That said, this story does contain potential triggers for instances of bullying and harassment as well as some graphic violence. Reason number 1 to start this incredible series. Jude is the perfect lens and conduit to help us navigate this beautiful, fascinating, cruel, unforgiving world. Again, I want to emphasize that the Isles of Elfhame make for a place that is entirely unsafe for humans. Fairies believe that mortals are worthless playthings, that they are objects that only exist solely for their entertainment since they cannot control themselves in the presence of magic. Jude's point of view is so startling to read because even in her most vulnerable state, she is entirely willing to give herself over to her emotions, which makes her feel very honest. There's very little buffer between her thoughts and her actions. Of course, she keeps her personal strategies veiled, but her emotions are so transparently tied to her actions, and because of that, it's impossible to look away. Jude is not willing to hide or tone down any part of herself, no matter the consequences. She doesn't allow impossible odds and dangerous circumstances to erode the vibrancy of her existence. I think her perspective is what makes this book so thrilling because someone we would consider to be a well-balanced person would stop themselves before doing something that could ultimately lose them everything they care about. But Jude does not have the luxury of being patient or docile or polite. She has to use that anger and raw emotion to take risks and move ahead because her opponents will not hesitate to use their hatred to hurt Jude or her siblings. So I respect her because she's constantly having to prove her own worth, but she refuses to let anyone else dictate what that looks like, even in a hostile environment. Reason number 2 is that the characters and relationships that unfold within this narrative are not easy to understand, and there is value in that. I think this is one of those stories where you're not always going to agree with everything that's said or done because these characters have both the insight and the guts to make some very hard moves. Their willingness to go all in and to commit to unwieldy decisions is what engages me and what makes the story so freaking addictive. And it's satisfying to read about because these characters do form meaningful relationships, but they will still not hesitate to exploit each other's weaknesses. Without so much as flinching, they will still move to outmaneuver each other's strategies before they're even put into play, and they will not feel bad about it. I talked about this idea in relation to the Lost Sisters novella, but we want women especially to be easy to digest. We want them to act in ways that are distinctive and complex, but only in ways that align with what we already believe, and this story will not give you that. One of the best examples is the relationship between Jude and her adoptive father, Maddox. Now, this is the same person who killed Jude's parents right in front of her eyes, but he's also taught her everything she knows and has loved her in his own complicated way. I like that they're able to acknowledge that love exists in this relationship, but it's not an easy kind of love. Maddox's pointed history of violence has left a mark on his relationship with Jude, but they do have a relationship nonetheless. And that dynamic parallels itself in the relationships Jude has with other characters and even her double-edged relationship with Fairyland itself as a place she loves but that does not love her back. I like to be challenged by complex relationships that make their own kind of sense in their own context, and you definitely get that from this book. Reason number 3 is that Jude does not look down on people who think and act differently than she does. This is such a small detail, but one that's entirely worth mentioning because especially in female-centric YA, there can be a lot of cattiness and characters arbitrarily deciding that other women are less. This kind of goes back to my point about the story exploring complex, uneasy relationships, but even if the person is Jude's opponent, even if they act against her interests, she does not pass judgment. She may not be happy with them, she may not understand or endorse their choices, but she still recognizes that they have a right to make those choices. I mention this especially because Jude's twin sister Taryn provides such a wonderful, natural counterpoint to Jude's hold-nothing-back persona. Taryn will perform acquiescence and play by the fairies' rules and apologize while they're being tormented, all in hopes that keeping their heads down will make them disappear from notice. To Taryn, the invisibility of politeness is another valid form of protection, so to speak. I think there's definitely an argument to be made for that, and doing so does not make Taryn weak or less, especially not in Jude's eyes. Reason number 4. This story provides a thoughtful look at the intersections of power and all its different forms. This is something that really struck me because often power and the acquisition of power are primarily conveyed through means of aggression or violence. And while those are definitely present in this story, we see that power can take on so many more forms. In this first book alone, we tap into veins of political power, physical power, aggression, hatred, love, romance, sexual desire or attention, magic, acquiescence, compliance, cooperation, and allegiance. There are so many different ways to gain, assert, and access power, especially because it's not a static force. There is so much nuance in the way this story displays how all these factors are constantly in flux, which subsequently affects how powerful or powerless Jude feels at any given moment. And it's also fascinating to think about because as the story progresses, you see that losing or failing is not the equivalent of being powerless. Jude is up against so many different players, opponents, court members, and forces that are beyond her control, and with each clash you gain a deeper understanding of how asserting power is simply a matter of being in a better position at that exact moment. What it means to have power is a fluid concept. It's something that changes based on how we define it and use it. And reason number 5, above everything else, The Cruel Prince is a love letter to the reclamation of power and agency in a world that refuses to afford you any of those things. Everywhere in Elfhame, Jude hears these constant reminders. You are not one of us. You are different. You are less. You are weak. You are not wanted in this place. The very world Jude and her sisters occupy was designed to destroy them at every turn. They have no choice but to survive, no matter what that entails. All their lives, Jude and Taryn have tried so hard to be good enough. They not only have to match the folk in their intensity, in their abilities, in their quick-wittedness, but they have to be better if they hope to even establish a baseline of safety for themselves. And I think that's what really drives Jude to do what she does. She's almost envious of how the folk are accepted, how their existence is recognized and acknowledged, and she knows that she is not invited, much less allowed to be part of that. And now finally, after constantly being afraid, she's realizing that playing by rules that are meant to keep you down will never win you acceptance. Doing everything the quote-unquote right way won't make hostile groups accept your existence. And even if it did, there would be no value in erasing yourself to fit someone else's standards. The folk sense that Jude is angry and desperate for acknowledgement, which is why they constantly endanger and threaten her life, because they know that's what will hurt the most. But Jude will not be intimidated. She's already been scared every single day of her life. Make no mistake, she's still vulnerable, she's still afraid, but she's decided that the people above her have finally taken enough. And by going rogue, by going off script, that's how she's able to access her own innate power, by choosing for herself and refusing to give another inch. To say this series is tremendous is an understatement. I highly recommend it. So if you've read this one yourself, if you would like to, or if you've recently spiraled after reading The Wicked King like I have, I would love to discuss further in the comments. But that's everything I had for this review and recommendation today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!